have Mr. Joseph Chen, Undersecretary for Financial Services and the Treasury Bureau for Hong Kong for the Government of Hong Kong SAR. Next, we will have Mr. Rockson Hsu. He is the Chief Executive Officer of ZA Bank. Our third panelist is Ms. Dharini Hemant, the head of PayMe from Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation Limited. Last but not least, we'll have Mr. Ernest Leung. He is the Group Chief Operating Officer at WeLab. Now, let me give the floor to Ms. Kwan to operate the discussion of the panel on FinTech today. Ms. Kwan, please.
Good morning. Good morning, panelists. We're so honored today to have you all, and we're looking forward to hearing your insights. So I'm going to try to give the best in terms of the most time for you to just give your personal experiences to our viewers today. So viewers, we have this great program called Slido. If you have specific questions or would like to ask questions specifically to our esteemed panelists today, please do type your questions in, and I'm going to be fielding your questions with them too. So take this opportunity to do that. So we have Joseph, the Undersecretary for Financial Services and Treasury Bureau today, and I'm going to ask Joseph to kick off. Joseph, what is the government's vision and strategy for fostering the development of fintech in Hong Kong? What's the blueprint and what are your plans?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Angelina. It's great to be here today with all of you. Well, first of all, let me set the scene to talk about the strength of Hong Kong as a fintech hub to begin with. Well, as you all know, Hong Kong is the leading international financial center in Asia. We top the league tables across equities, bonds, insurance, or wealth management in Asia as well. So very naturally, most of the financial institutions, they would set up the Asian regional headquarters here in Hong Kong. And also, a lot of firms, multinational firms, would also set up their biggest Asia's presence here in Hong Kong as well. So for fintech companies, very naturally, they would enjoy tremendous access to potential clients, to potential investors, and to potential business partners. And that's why we see so many fintech companies choose to set up the business here in Hong Kong. And also, traditionally, as always, we are always the gateway to mainland China from the rest of the world. So that also helps fintech companies from other places to use Hong Kong as a platform to penetrate into the mainland China market, and at the same time to help fintech companies from mainland China to use Hong Kong as a springboard to attract foreign investments or also to tap the international client base as well. So that's always been kind of like our natural strength as an international financial center and for fintech hub as well. In terms of the policies from the government, we apply a multi-pronged approach to advance the development of our fintech sector. Well, first of all, we enhance financial infrastructure as well as regulatory and market environment to build a more vibrant fintech ecosystem. One example is that earlier this year, we launched the Fintech Proof of Concept Study Scheme. So what we do is we encourage fintech companies to partner with financial institutions to more actively develop new products and new services. And so far, this scheme, we have already approved 93 applications this year with an amount of around 10 million subsidies. So it's very well received. Secondly, we provide support to financial services practitioners and also students to nurture more fintech talents. One example is that last year, under the Anti-Epidemic Fund, we actually launched a fintech anti-epidemic scheme for talent development, which the government actually sponsor 1,000 full-time fintech jobs with a 10,000 Hong Kong dollars per month for the employer for 1 year period, so that the fintech companies can use the subsidies to hire fintech talents. And in a very short period of time, we attracted over 1,000 applications already. So that's also very well received. Thirdly, we facilitate closer collaboration with the mainland and overseas jurisdictions on fintech adoption and cross-border or cross-boundary application. So, for example, with the mainland, we are exploring or studying the application of ECNY. Actually, the first phase of pilot testing between Hong Kong MA and also PBOC's Digital Currency Institute went very smoothly and was completed already of using ECNY for cross-boundary payments. And now we are exploring with PBOC on the second phase of testing, which will include FPS and also include more Hong Kong banks to be participating as well. And fourthly, we also focus on promoting Hong Kong's strengths of fintech to overseas and mainland counterparts. So one prime example is that the Fintech Week, as mentioned by MC earlier today, will be held in the first week of November. This year is already the 6th edition of Fintech Week, which we expect over 250 speakers, 400 exhibitors, and 30 delegations from over 100 economies to join us. So it will be a great event for the fintech practitioners, for regulators, potential partners, and investors to exchange ideas and to form business ties as well. So all in all, you'll see that we have a wide range of initiatives to push for fintech development in Hong Kong. And I'm glad to say that today we are home to over 600 fintech companies and startups that include wealth tech, reg tech, blockchain, so on and so forth. And in terms of virtual banks, we have 8 licensed virtual banks already. We have 4 virtual insurers in Hong Kong as well. And also, according to the Global FinTech Adoption Index, we actually have 67% in 2019, a level which is actually higher than other major markets such as the United States, France, and Japan. So we believe we have the right platform for fintech companies to foster, and in return, of course, that should provide a lot of opportunities for our next generation to develop a career in fintech. Thank you.
Joseph, I cannot agree more about what you said in terms of the exciting parts about Hong Kong and how we're growing as a fintech center. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask some more questions and come back to you with some more about what the government will be doing. And I have to put in a plug for FinTech Week. It's going to be really, really exciting this year. So for all of you out there, if there are student tickets, please do get involved in FinTech Week and get involved and learn. So Ernest, you're the COO of WeLab, and you're on the coalface of what's going on in fintech. What are some of the latest market trends that you're seeing as a chief operating officer, as WeLab, as a part of this whole ecosystem? And Joseph just painted a great picture that makes this so exciting. Please tell us.
Great, thank you. Great to be here, and thanks for that question, Angelina. Well, ultimately, fintech is a combination of technology, financial services, right? It's a way to provide a much better experience and a new experience to the end consumer at hopefully a much more efficient ability to set it up. Now, in Hong Kong, we can't not talk about fintech without mentioning of the virtual bank. But more importantly, there are a few other areas worth noting is the use of data, collaboration with the GBA, and of course, beyond consumer, there's actually a B2B argument for financial technologies as well. Credit to the government, the Hong Kong government, of course, the HMA. Hong Kong is a few years ahead in terms of establishment of virtual banking. What that means for the workforce, what that means for young individuals entering the workforce today is the immense head start and opportunity that you will have. I think early in the keynote speech, Bonnie talked about mobility, talked about the ability to work outside of Hong Kong. For joining virtual banking in Hong Kong, you would start to have the experience of not just the theoretical application, but practical use of the technology, data, consumer insights, consumer behavior. And most of these experiences will be very beneficial and much needed, in fact, as the rest of Asia also jump onto the bandwagon of virtual banking. So being on the forefront of the technology and the application will give you a much better leg up in your career going forward. Now, of course, data is one of the most important raw ingredients of any fintech businesses. So the sensitivity to data, the protection of data, the respect of data, the ability to make sense out of what the data means, that's another skill set that's very important, and I'm sure my panelists will be speaking about that as well. Talk about GBA, and Joseph mentioned the policy on GBA. WeLab has the benefit of actually entering into the GBA before the term GBA was formed. WeLab was established in Hong Kong in 2013, and we immediately moved and expanded into Shenzhen in 2014. So the collaboration there, we see two key themes or pillars. One is obviously the ability to enter into the China market and also to serve the 72 million population of the GBA, but really to understand the culture of the workforce, to understand the culture of the consumers in the China market. Obviously, that gives WeLab a big market for which to conduct our business. But equally important is getting a connection to the workforce that is in Shenzhen. WeLab has about 800-900 employees group-wide, of which 500 are actually in Shenzhen, and especially in the Qianhai area in Shenzhen. The importance there is that the cross-collaboration, the skills and experience that one builds up gives us a lot of flexibility between Hong Kong and Shenzhen as and when we grow. Talent is in shortage. I think Bonnie mentioned that you're all in very heavy demand. That's definitely the case. And being an early entrant or earlier entrant into Shenzhen give us an ability to tap into the workforce that are there. At the same time, it gives our Hong Kong colleagues an opportunity to go north and experience and learn what that economy is about, what that workforce is about, in order to continue to contribute back to Hong Kong as and when you decide to return. So once again, the themes are data, virtual banking, and the GBA. Last but not least is the business-to-business opportunity. Right? We always talked about serving the end consumer. The technology behind is actually useful to serve other incumbent financial services company, maybe smaller banks, consumer finance companies, and themes around machine learning, credit assessment technology, privacy computing, federated learning. These are all tools that WeLab has built in the past years where we're able to serve not just the end consumer, but other businesses as well. So do look out for those trends.
No, those are great trends, and that really sets the whole stage for all of us, especially being a part of the GBA. Thank you for that, Ernest. So, Dharini, you're the interim head of PayMe, a very, very exciting, can I even call it an app, or can I call it a service? But you're head of it right now, and can you share with us how are some of the banks responding to some of the trends that Ernest is laying out, what some of the things that Bonnie and Lawrence have brought up? How are they responding to these trends and balancing their strategies versus the traditional, let's go to the bank, go to the teller, versus virtual businesses?
Sure.
So, thanks.
Thanks, Angelina. Great question. And again, I think the things that Ernest and Joseph have talked about sets the stage quite well for that, right? I want to start by picking up on something that Ernest was talking about, which is, a lot of the changes that we're seeing, the fundamental trend that's driving that is that shift in customer behavior, right? People of Hong Kong, whether as individuals or as businesses, are adopting technology at a pace that we've never seen before, right? We all know the mobile phone is starting to rule our lives, right? And I think that's driving a lot of the changes that we're seeing, whether it's regulation, whether it's banks, whether it's virtual banks that they're building. So what have large banks started to do to embrace that change? Number one, they're investing in technology and technology-backed capabilities at a scale we've never seen before, right? I mean, if you take HSBC, for example, the raft of enhancements we've come out with on our mobile banking app or, a PayMe for that matter, in the last 3 years versus the time before that is completely different, right? So it's really taking that journey of investment into technology and data to a whole new different scale. The second things that banks are starting to do is to learn from virtual banks, right? So where the more traditional banks have wealth of experience or a big customer base, virtual banks are a lot more nimble, they're a lot more agile in taking an idea and bringing it into the market, right? The way Ernest was talking about. So large banks are drawing inspiration from that. They're drawing inspiration from fintechs that are out there building new experiences and saying, how can we bring that into the larger institution, into our infrastructure? The third thing that large banks have started to do, and again, Joseph touched upon this in his introduction, is working with fintechs, alongside fintechs, and sometimes even as fintechs, right? So I know, Angelina, you teed it up beautifully. PayMe is almost like a fintech within the HSBC family. It's a small team that builds product and experiences primarily through the app to customers, right? So modeling that way of working, modeling some of the ways fintechs bring innovation into the bank, really working with them to do that. And also working with fintechs, right? I mean, globally, HSBC works with over hundreds of fintechs. We've identified and established processes to be able to bring fintechs on board and work with them in weeks for proof of concepts. So really taking away a lot of the more traditional, perhaps challenges that might have existed and making it a lot easier for that collaboration between banks and fintechs. And the last thing that I want to say, in terms of addressing these trends, if the last few years are any indication, right, it's the pace of change is going up quite rapidly in this area, right? So there's no once and done, right? I mean, if you go back 10, 15 years, large banks would do a big technology rehaul program and then declare success at the end of it and move on, right? I mean, what the world is telling us now is that's not the way to work. It's constant change. It's constant innovation. So it's about how do you continue to interact with fintechs, with virtual banks, with even the I would say, wider industries beyond financial services and sort of continue to learn from that and innovate, right? I mean, at HSBC, for example, one of the things we do is every 2 weeks, we have a speed dating with fintechs, right? Where we exchange ideas, learn from them, and identify areas where we can start working together. So it's about that constant innovation and fertilization of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Dharini. It's amazing because you're getting a crossover from traditional banks to virtual banks and virtual banks going into traditional banking. Perfect timing for me to ask Ernest, as the CEO of ZA Bank. Thank you very much today, Rockson, for coming today. And how has the pandemic caused any differences in your business strategy? You're one of the first virtual banks in Hong Kong. How has that changed your business strategy and hiring requirements for virtual banks?
Good morning, all. I think the pandemic, in a way, it started back in early 2020, and it's, from a business point of view, part of a contingency plan because it's something that happens that we need to react immediately. And overall, it doesn't really have a big impact on the bank because we're ready for it. And I think to give a good example to all the students on screen, two actually. One. First is we started a bank from scratch, all working from home. I think that's one new thing to the market. When the pandemic hits, we kick everyone home on the 29th of January. So that's right after Chinese New Year. But then I think if you think about it, well, I have 30 years of experience too. So when we started off work, it's basically impossible. But then technology have allowed us to get everyone working at home safely and securely. So I think that's what pandemic did to us, to basically materialize or monetize the contingency plan. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I think the pandemic has drive up cashless transactions. So people who are staying at home, it's actually not an ideal thing to have the pandemic, but then we do leverage on every situation, just like yourself. get on every opportunity, just like what Bonnie said earlier. So I think the pandemic is actually not a good thing, but then we leverage on the situation whereby you see that the cashless transaction in Hong Kong and also the adoption of virtual banking, which I think 3 policy objectives that you all have to remember. First is virtual banks are here to promote fintech and innovation. Secondly is to promote financial inclusion. And thirdly, we're offering a new customer experience. So I think the easiest one is new customer experience because everybody's mobile phone is a branch. So that's a very big innovation for us in Hong Kong. And as Joseph said earlier, it's one of the initiatives of the smart banking. So we're part of a bigger picture. And I think the business strategy in terms of running a virtual bank is first, the new experience on the mobile phone means you can have banking 24/7. And the mobile phone allows you to open an account within 5 minutes. And the latest record we have is 2 minutes. So imagine yourself walking into a branch, getting a ticket, queuing up, filling up forms. That usually are measured in hours. So virtual bank or actually technology allow us to make things more efficient and effective. So the latest record is 2 minutes. So think about the time you save on opening an account with a virtual bank versus the time you spend on going to a branch. Those are the time that we save for Hong Kong and increasing productivity. I think from a virtual banking point of view, some key items that I want to share with everybody is we also initiated debit card. A debit card is a very old medium which haven't been used for a long time, but then we actually think of using a debit card because first is you spend what you have. It's not a credit card. And secondly, we split up into different products. A credit card effectively, from a derivative point of view, is a combination of a debit card, a 1-month interest-free OD, plus a lot of rewards in Hong Kong. So what we did is we actually scrap out the credit part, and then we have a debit card with a lot of rewards. And as a result, we have launched the bank for only 18 months, and our card right now is one of the most active Visa card, even though it's a debit in Hong Kong. So I think fintech drives a lot of things, but then the real theme behind, as Ernest said, is the people, which is yourself. I mean, we need talents in Hong Kong to drive the banking industry and also financial services because it's FSDC. So actually, not just bankers, even though we have 4 bankers, I mean, Joseph being an ex-banker. Insurance is also a key thing. So on top of virtual banking, Hong Kong also have virtual insurance. And CA Bank is one who did the first banker insurance collaboration and also with a virtual insurer, CA Insurer. So there are a lot of things that I think every one of you have to stay suspicious and curious and also learn things every day by day. And I think one key note from Bonnie is work-life balance. It's actually not a one-day work-life balance. It's actually, you have to look at it a bit more longer horizon. And hopefully you all get to know and understand more about us today as well as we learn more from you.
Rockson, you've just covered a ton of questions that actually are coming through the question list. So it's great that you covered all of these topics. And I'm going to come back to the panelists. I'm getting some really nice questions from Raymond, from KS. I'd like to address some of them. And thank you out there for everybody asking questions. But, Joseph, I need you to explain a bit more. What kind of support from the government is available to students and professionals who are exploring opportunities in fintech? And what are, I'm addressing a question from Raymond, what are some of the things that regulators and government officials are doing specifically in the area of securities tokens, in the area of financial inclusion to promote fintech?
Thanks, Angelina. Well, let me first start on what the government is doing in terms of nurturing fintech talents.
Yep.
So, as I mentioned earlier, of course, we have the Fintech Anti-Epidemic Scheme for Talent Development launched last year. The other measure we launched last year was actually a financial practitioners fintech training program, which was launched in March last year. So we offer training courses through Cyberport actually to market practitioners in a wide range of fintech-related subjects, with over 1,200 financial practitioners joining us from banking sector, from insurance sector, and from securities industry as well. But the thing is, a lot of market practitioners have been performing traditional functions, but as the business evolves, their understanding of fintech is important, and there are also more fintech-related jobs available as well. So it's important to empower them to seize those opportunities. And of course, why fintech talent is important is because at the end of the day, fintech is, to me, is a business combining innovation and also user experience. So at the end of the day, it's a people's business. And the government recognized that as well. That's why if you look at the policy address announced by the chief executive earlier this month, we also have measures on grooming fintech talents. One is that we are now exploring the development of professional qualification standards under the qualifications framework for the fintech sector, so that it will provide a clearer and accredited professional development ladder for employers and practitioners. The other measure announced in the policy address is that we will have more courses related to fintech to be included in the list of reimbursable courses under the Continuing Education Fund, so that we can attract more people to learn about fintech and eventually joining the industry as well. The other question you mentioned about is tokenization and other aspects in regulations. I know time is running, but I'll just touch on it very quickly. At the moment, we have a voluntary system for our virtual asset trading platform to get license from SFC, but we are looking into establishing a regime for virtual asset trading services or activities. We plan to submit such a legislative proposal to LASCO next year for the discussion. So in that aspect, on one hand, we'll have a more clear and regulated environment for virtual asset operators to operate here in Hong Kong. And the other thing we're working on is we always talk about digital currency in terms of maybe on the central bank digital currencies. So early on, I mentioned about the study on ECNY, on cross-boundary application with mainland China. And at the same time, the Hong Kong MA is also studying the application of Hong Kong dollar as well. So these are all very exciting opportunities, which will open more doors and more opportunities for our fintech talents in Hong Kong. Thank you.
That's fantastic, and that, I think, answers some of the questions that we're getting from our audience. So keep them coming. So Raymond had asked, the Greater Bay Area opens these opportunities and for virtual banks to tap into China's growing wealth. I wonder how long it will take for VBs to have accessibility to these opportunities on the evolution of the regulatory landscape between Hong Kong and mainland China. So I think all of you are answering these questions that we're getting from our audience. So thank you for that, and just keep that in mind, and I'll try to filter some of those questions back to you. Back to Ernest. Is there any difference between the talent that a virtual bank is looking for versus what a traditional bank is looking for? What are you looking for? Enthusiasm? What are key things that we've been giving tips to the young people that are on this program today? What are things that you're looking for when you hire?
I think there are a few things. First of all, WeLab Group, we operate, of course, WeLab Bank. We have a lending company. We've got B2B businesses in China, and as well as Indonesia. So I guess the thing to look for is not specifically just to a virtual bank, but to fintech across the board. But before we talk about differences, I think it's worthwhile to talk about some fundamentals does not change whether you are looking for a career in traditional banking, finance companies, or in a virtual fintech environment. And those are, just you have to be hardworking, you have to be curious, you have to have good ethics, and last but not least is a consumer-centric mindset. At the end of the day, you're serving consumers, you're serving your clients. So be it virtual or physical, those are attributes that you must remember. Particularly for fintech, though, I think a few things probably worth noting is we look for intellectually curious people. At the end of the day, virtual banking or fintech, it is a people business, as the panelists have mentioned earlier. We have to understand people. Technology is the means for you to deliver your services and products to the end consumer. But it is the understanding of consumer insights that will drive that innovation, that will drive that product development, that will drive that delivery ability to the customers. So having an open mind, being curious on what new technologies are around, what people are thinking, how can I do this better? I think that's an important element to remember. Now, at WeLab, we also give a lot of opportunities to young people, as long as you step up and are willing to grab that opportunity. A movie, and I'm sure you know which one, have a famous line where one of the actors say, with great power come great responsibility. I'll let you guess which movie that was. At WeLab, we turn it around. With great responsibility comes great power. What that means is the more you're willing to take on, the more you're trying to step forward and say, let me handle this, let me take a stab at it, let me try and do that for you, the more authority and responsibility and power within your organization you will amass. And therefore, we look for people with that attitude. We look for people who are comfortable with working under an ambiguous environment. Fintech is new. We are charting, we're going to territories that is uncharted. We're going to directions that maybe others haven't gone. So the ability to actually work in an ambiguous and fast-moving, developing environment, that's very important. So technical skills, obviously. Consumer understanding, obviously. But having that open-mindedness, curiosity, willing to do more mindset, it's critical in a fintech environment.
I would say that's critical everywhere, but a great attitude really goes a long way. Thank you, Ernest. Dharini, many students are very, very curious, and I'm sure the ones that are on this program today are very curious to learn more about the work culture and job responsibilities at digital payment service providers. But they're probably thinking, big bank, gee, it's still a mystery to them. Could you tell us what it's like working in a digital payment service in a bank, and how do you achieve synergy by collaborating with other business lines? And I'm going to take this opportunity, as a woman, as a leader in a bank, how do you help promote diversity and inclusion in your bank? Sorry to lob that question, but I had to ask you that.
Not at all. Thanks, Angelina. And that's a very kind of multifaceted question. So let me try and sort of break it up into a few different parts, right? I think the first part of it is, what is it like to work in a digital payments solution provider within a large bank, right? And now I'll extend that a little bit into saying a semi-fintech within a bank, if you want. The first thing I would say is there is no typical day. It is a very dynamic environment, right? And I think Ernest touched upon this. The thing that drives a product or a business like this is that customer problem, right? So the first thing I would say is there's no typical day. There's a dynamic set of challenges. And usually it's about a group of very passionate individuals getting together and trying to say, right, how do we make our customers' life easier? What pain points can we solve? What experience can we make better, right? So there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of energy. The second thing that probably is a characteristic of a typical day is it's very flat. So sort of perhaps what you would see in more traditional banks, which is a lot more of structured governance and forums. A lot of that is not true in a more fintech or startup style environment. So it's a lot more flat organization. There's a lot more ad hoc meetings of people just getting together and brainstorming. And often these are cross-functional, right? So you could have someone who's responsible for product sitting with someone who's responsible for marketing or risk or consumer, getting together in a room and just creatively trying to respond to a customer pain point or trying to come up with a solution. The third thing that I want to say, which is probably a very characteristic part of ways of working, is it's informal, right? So again, what we consciously try to do is to minimize hierarchies or rigid structures. There's a lot of fun involved, right? If you're in an intense environment, you're working with people, you're trying to get creative energy flowing, then it's very important to have fun with that group of people together. So very often at 3 p.m. on the floor, you'll see someone playing table tennis or darts or going out for a run. And that's part of that creative process, right? It's part of getting that team to work in unison. It's a bit like, the drum beat when you row together. You've got to get that team in the same rhythm. So all of this is contributing towards that. And then the last bit that you said, which is, how does this work versus the bank and the businesses, and how does that collaboration work? I would say, especially for something like PayMe, that is, in the DNA, right? We have the liberty of operating like a fintech, but leverage all the benefits that the big bank brings, right? So the experience, the customer data that Ernest was talking about, the richness of insight that exists, particularly for a bank like HSBC that spans retail banking, corporate banking, and large corporations as well. So all of that experience, data, insight, richness feeds into PayMe and the day-to-day operations, right? So it's a very exciting environment, very energetic, very dynamic, no typical day, and a lot of the qualities that Ernest was talking about is true for any individual you would see in that. Right? And then I think to pick up on your sort of last angle on what is it like as a woman leading this, and what can we do to promote diversity, I think HSBC and PayMe, we take diversity very seriously, right? Like we're super passionate about the diversity agenda, and it runs beyond gender almost, right? It's for me, diversity is in every aspect. Ethnicity, race, diversity of thought, right? Bringing different creative ideas. So we consciously try and sort of, number one, encourage that melting pot of ideas, backgrounds, thoughts to come in and power it, but also consciously look where there are barriers, right? Where if we think there's something that's limiting people, how do we hack away at those barriers and make it really easy? So personally for me and for HSBC, I would say it's a super important topic. We take it seriously, and for me, it's all about taking away the barriers and making it really easy for people to come together and solve these problems.
Thank you, Dharini. That was great. Now, I have to say, next year, can we have more time for all of these panels? Because there's so many questions coming through. So I've just been told I only have 5 more minutes. So guess what, Rockson? You have the last word and the last question. So I'm going to ask this question. And I'm going to work in something that Morris, one of our viewers, has just asked too. So I'm going to work that into the question. So Rockson, we're on our way to a full economic recovery. Hong Kong is doing better and better, and we're coming along quite well. It seems like a lot of fintech firms have not stopped recruiting ambitiously. What's the hiring appetite for virtual banks? And is fintech open to everyone? For example, do students with non-tech backgrounds stand a chance? And just working in Morris's question, I'm studying, I come from a traditional background, I've done a diploma in fintech. What are some of the possible fields that maybe I'm not a techie, but what are things that I can get into? What are opportunities that I can embrace, and maybe some skills that I can learn to get into fintech and move into this area, even though I come from traditional broking or traditional finance? Over to you, Rockson.
Yep,
Thank you.
3 minutes, actually. I think quickly, just want to give everybody a sense what a virtual bank, at least at my bank, what we look like. I have around 500 people, 200 plus is on the IT side, so you can say those are fintech. But actually, the word fintech is embraces in every one of the bankers in my bank, because technology and knowing your customer and banking knowledge is actually all in one person. And therefore, don't differentiate yourself from a banker or fintech. I mean, for anyone who wants to work at a virtual bank, you need to understand the rule. We are in a regulated environment, so knowing the rules, meaning you know banking first. Technology is something that helps and automate, but it doesn't mean that everyone needs to know how to write the codes. So out of my 500 people, 200 are tech. A lot are actually in the second line of defense, which is infrastructure, risk. Those are actually around another almost 195 people. So when you think about first line of defense, I have retail banking, wholesale banking, treasury. And that only makes up like 80, not even 80 actually. That's almost, makes up only around 40 plus people. And the remaining is internal audit. So think about what you like Then you can think about what I want. I mean, what I want is pretty obvious because every position is different. So learn about the position that you're looking for. Learn about the potential employer that you're looking for. Do your homework, as one said. I mean, we all need to do due diligence. And diligence goes both ways, right? When I interview you, I read your CV. So when you come to us, you better do your homework to know where we are. CA Bank being the largest and number one virtual bank right now means we serve 400,000 customers from 0 to 1. So that's a big number, and that's why we need a lot of people. But then we do need a lot of hardworking and smart people. So that's where we are.
Thank you so much, Rockson. So we're running out of time here. We have a chance for the last word. Let's make a prediction. Where do you see fintech going next year? And what's one key trend that you're going to focus on for the next year? We have 1 minute. Over to you, Roxanne. You start first.
Fintech is not going away. I think the virtual banking model has been recognized by our regulators as disclosed in June just now for Hong Kong. We're going Fintech 2025. And the first focus is all bank go Fintech. So I think all of us, I mean, the Fintech is not just something very specialized to virtual banking. So every one of us embrace technology. Don't get scared of it. You don't need to be a techie and write codes, but then you need to understand technology.
Dharini.
Thanks, Angelina. I think building on that, right, fintech, the whole division between banks and fintech, I think is going to start blurring. So they're going to become part of this one integral fabric, and there's going to be fertilization of talent, ideas, all kinds of crossover between the two.
Joseph, you'll have the last word. 1 second. Ernest.
Fintech and all the other tech will be working closely together. I think the word ecosystem is probably a little overused, but I think fintech will join hands with other industry to make much better experience for our consumer.
Last word, Joseph, for today.
Well, for fintech, I see across different segments between wealth tech, cybersecurity, regtech, so on and so forth are all booming. So fintech will be the way up for sure. And I would encourage all the students to get yourself prepared, equipped, and capture those opportunities. Thank you.
You heard it from the experts. Thank you very much, panel, today. Roxanne, Dharini, Joseph, Ernest, thank you very, very much today. We look forward to next year's panel. Thank you. Thank you very much.